I was a little frustrated with just doing research for research sake. There's always like, okay, let's get a grant, let's do some research, publish a paper. And it's always like, okay, this is great for adding another leaf to the grant tree of knowledge, so to speak. But that knowledge never really ended up making an impact on human lives directly, right? So there was something about, you know, the need for entrepreneurship almost to translate that, medical research and innovation in a way that ends up reaching patients, because that's what we all need at the end of the day. Is we need products and we need solutions, we need services that make healthcare better. And it just needs people that are willing to take the risk of taking it from the research setting all the way to the commercial setting.
Welcome to NGBiLab, a podcast about innovators and disruptors who are creating the next generation of companies in Canadian life sciences. Hi, it's Jim Wilson, and my guest today is Zaid Atto, who is the founder and CEO of Xpan in Vaughan, Ontario. Zaid is a biomedical engineer who started the company after working with surgeons doing minimally invasive procedures who were frustrated with the limitations of the existing devices they were forced to use. While still at the University of Toronto, Zaid began developing a new approach to surgical trocars, which are the instruments that are used to access the body during laparoscopic procedures. That early work eventually became the foundation for Xpan, a medical device company focused on improving safety and outcomes in minimally invasive surgery. It's a fascinating story, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. This podcast was recorded in January 2025. Our guest today is Zaid Atto of Xpan Medical. Zaid, thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you, Jim.
I'm looking forward to our conversation. I was doing some research on what you and your team are doing, and I was really fascinated by it. If I understand correctly, you're obviously a medical device company, but you're focusing on minimally invasive surgery. And I'm not a doctor, so I would appreciate you telling us what it is exactly that you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So the field of minimal invasive surgery is relatively large, and there's over 15 million procedures done annually around the world that leverages minimal invasive procedures. Minimal invasive procedures happen all over the body, right? From head to toe, so to speak. But the largest and the most popular ones that people may be familiar with are abdominal procedures or laparoscopic procedures. And nowadays, there's a huge uptake of robotic procedures. And essentially, all those procedures, they're also called keyhole procedures. A lot of audience may be familiar with that term. But the way they're done is that surgeons will essentially stab a number of tubular devices, so at least 3 or up to 6 sometimes, depending on the complexity of the procedure. Those tubular devices can be very small, but oftentimes they are large because the small tubes do not allow the surgeons to put, the instruments that they typically need. So sometimes they end up having to use larger tubular devices, and those tubular devices are known as trocars in the field of minimal invasive surgery. The larger trocars can be as big as a steak knife, 12 millimeter in diameter. So imagine just a large steak knife being kind of stabbed inside the abdomen, not just once, but sometimes multiple times. Obviously, that does lead to complications. It's more difficult for the surgeon to insert those larger devices inside the abdomen. Many times, it could lead to internal injury of organs. So imagine just as soon as that trocar punctures the abdomen, it sort of plunges fast, and sometimes it could lead to very complicated injuries and even death. Aside from that, the larger the trocar is, the more chances that it would lead to higher post-operative complications and morbidity. So whether it's the development of post-operative hernias or just higher pain and recovery thresholds for the patients that they have to overcome as a result of those operations.
Wow. So you're a doctor?
I'm a biomedical engineer by training. So I'm not a doctor, but I have had the privilege of attending many procedures and seeing doctors do these procedures and many other types of procedures in minimal invasive surgery as well.
So where'd the idea come from first?
Yeah, so this was an interesting kind of journey of how I got to be the founder of this company. I was essentially a biomedical engineer at the University of Toronto. I was still completing my studies, and in my final year of engineering school, we typically have to do something called a capstone project, which is the final kind of engineering project for the year. And typically clients come to the program and they pitch their problems, and engineering students have to work on developing solutions. So at the time, there was a surgeon from one of the Toronto-based hospitals on University Avenue that came to the engineering department. She was very frustrated with the current standard of care of the current trocars, and she wanted a radially expandable trocar. So she wanted a better version of a trocar. And to me, I kind of had done many internships and looked into medical entrepreneurships, and entrepreneurship in general is always, a topic of interest to me. And so I did a lot of market research at the time in identifying, potential market opportunity, the regulatory landscape, the IP landscape, the technology kind of landscape, competitive analysis, and so on. So I did kind of a mini business analysis on the opportunity, and I realized, well, there's a huge gap in this market. The field certainly lacks, innovation, because this field of technology was innovated on very early in the 1990s and early 2000, but, it kind of matured quickly and it stayed as is for the past, 20, 30 years.
So, and when were you doing this research?
So this was back in 2016, 2017 when I graduated. We worked on this project. I really loved the potential of this technology. At the time, or right before this time, my dad actually almost died of a nearly ruptured appendix,
I'm sorry.
and his life was saved by minimally invasive procedure.
Wow.
Likewise, my grandmother had to undergo a life-saving, laparoscopic procedure. My cousin also, and it just being in the medical space, I realized that I probably will one day have to undergo a minimally invasive procedure over the course of my life, or at least many of the people that I love and know will have to undergo, life-saving procedures through minimal invasive techniques. And it just bothered me that this kind of key technology that is used essentially ubiquitously in all minimal invasive procedures has not changed very much since the inception of the minimal invasive surgery techniques. And after graduating, I did work at Sunnybrook Hospital in a research capacity, and I kept kind of tinkering at this idea on the side. And then, eventually decided to take it full time, and plunge deep into the entrepreneurial world back
Uh,
in 2018, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, so it's 7 years ago. So the idea came from a surgeon from Bedpan Alley in Toronto who had a real problem that frustrated her. You saw a potential solution. And then I guess the catalyst to continue this was what your family's experiences were at the time.
Family experiences, and not only that, but I made sure to do some more due diligence, because in medical innovation, you typically get the saying of like, oh, you ask, 10 surgeons their opinion, they give you 11 answers,
Yeah.
right? So I made sure that it wasn't just a problem that's happening for one surgeon, right? So I went out and interviewed and surveyed tens of surgeons, and throughout that process, I discovered that there is a real problem in this space. And there's many different like little problems that can all be resolved through developing a smaller trocar device that is radially expandable. So it seemed that, the intuition of the first surgeon was really spot on in terms of solving problems of a lot of other surgeons across many different disciplines. Audiences may appreciate that minimal invasive surgery in the abdomen can be a nebulous topic, and it does cover everything from gastrointestinal and general surgery procedures. So something like appendix, gallbladder procedures, spleen procedures, stomach procedures, all the way to urology procedures. So kidney stones and kidney cancer and other urology related procedures, as well as gynecology procedures. So hysterectomies, endometriosis, pelvic floor reconstruction, like all these procedures that a lot of people are familiar with. And all of them leverage the same technique, right? They all use the same tools, the same instruments, and the same trocars. So there's a huge kind of segment of surgery that leverages these technologies, and they could all benefit from innovation in this space.
So this is your first kick at the entrepreneurial can, and I'm wondering how long of a time period it was between hearing that doctor explain the problem that she was encountering to you saying, there's a business here. Was it like 2 years? Was it 18 months?
Yeah, I think it was almost like a year and a half to 2 year kind of process. I think for me, like I mentioned, I always had a bit of an entrepreneurial bug in me, but I never realized that I was going to do it immediately after finishing school. I thought it would, manifest itself later on in life. But what I had leveraged throughout my undergraduate studies is, really attend a lot of entrepreneurial seminars, listen to entrepreneurs, listen to podcasts or listen to seminars, etc. And also read a lot of books, and particularly in medical innovation. So there's this really well-known program out in Stanford called the Stanford Biodesign Program, where they sort of coach you. Like there's a process of medical innovation. It's not just random, right? There's a literal process where you have to go through needs finding, needs filtering, market research, technology iteration, and thinking about the investment landscape and so on and so forth. So it's a really well-guided program. And there's a book. It's just like a 600, 700 pages book that, they capture how this process is supposed to be done. So I had a great internship before my final year. I worked at a medical device company called Canavi, that's based in Toronto.
Really good company.
I worked there for 16 months as an intern, and I had a privilege of, learning a lot at that company and gaining a lot of mentors at that company that introduced me to the business concepts and gave me a lot to read. One of them was this book. So when I went back to school in my final year, I was kind of primed, if you will. I was looking for opportunities to explore this field of innovation, medical innovation, in particular, medical devices. And I had learned at least some of the basics of how to do some, market research and analysis and needs filtering, needs identification, and so on. So when this kind of opportunity came and presented itself, I guess I was kind of lucky to be the right place, right time, and primed to take advantage of this opportunity. Because in previous roles in the university and research, I was a little frustrated with just doing research for research sake. There's always okay, let's get a grant, let's do some research, publish a paper. And it's always okay, this is great for adding another leaf to the grant tree of knowledge, so to speak. But that knowledge never really ended up making an impact on human lives directly, right? So there was something about, the need for entrepreneurship almost to translate that, medical research and innovation in a way that ends up reaching patients, because that's what we all need at the end of the day. Is we need products and we need solutions, we need services that make healthcare better. And it just needs people that are willing to take the risk of taking it from the research setting all the way to the commercial setting. And that's a whole kind of can of worms and challenges associated with taking something from a research setting to a commercial setting.
Hi, it's Jim. When we come back, Zaid talks about the moment he decided to move away from research and commit fully to building a company, and how that decision set the stage for what eventually became Xpan. Stay with us. I'm Jim Wilson, and you're listening to NGBiLab, Canada's life sciences startup podcast. If you're not aware, the goal of this show and our other podcasts is to promote Next Great Big Ideas, Canada's Life Sciences Summit. NGBI is an annual national networking event for Canada's life sciences community, and we invite you to join us. For details, please go to nextgreatbigideas.com. Now, on that note, if you would like to become a sponsor of the summit or this podcast, please send us an email. My contact information is at the end of today's show, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much for your interest. Let's get back to our conversation. Hey, welcome back. It's Jim Wilson, and my guest today is Zaid Atto, who is the founder and CEO of Xpan in Vaughan, Ontario. One of the things that I love about being able to sit down with people like you and talk about the really cool ideas that are on the horizon is that you and everyone else I've spoken to are purpose-driven. You're not necessarily profit-driven. And that is so much fun to dive into. And it's so inspiring. Was there a moment when you thought, yeah, I'm doing this? Like, was there a clarifying moment where, okay, you did your research, you thought, yeah, maybe there's something here, but was there something that pushed you over the edge to say, I'm going down this path?
I can't say that there was a particular moment of this realization that, okay, I need to do this, but it was maybe a wave of different factors that culminated in me making this decision. I think part of it was always this sort of risk mitigation, or the realization if I'm going to do this, there's going to be a lot of risk, right? First time founder, relatively kind of young into my career. And, starting a company with no revenues, no investments, I'm going to have to raise all that money, get it done, raise a team, do all that. Sorry, not raise a team, but hire a team and figure it all out. So it was always like a lot of unknowns. But I think in my time at Sunnybrook, I did participate in a program called Medventions, which is a program that's really modeled after the Stanford by Design program, right? The only exception that it's shorter. So the Stanford by Design is supposed to be a full year. Medventions was 4 months. Nonetheless, it gave me a great kind of sneak peek into the OR. I got to be in your environment, work with a lot of different surgeons on a lot of different problems. And I think during that time, I was also in parallel kind of tinkering around with the trocar, idea, trying to push the technology and do more research as much as I can in my free time. And I think by doing this program at Sunnybrook, I realized that, I was sitting on a great kind of golden egg, so to speak. Like the idea, the problem was really well defined and crystallized by surgeons. I realized that the more that I did market research on other products, the better I became at doing market research in general. So I realized, okay, the market research I've done on this product itself is sufficient and indicates that there's a great potential, and the market is growing. Technologies are always going to be needed for minimal invasive surgery, and the trend is always going towards miniaturization, right? We always want to create smaller instruments and smaller devices that leave less of an impact on the human body. So overall, I think by doing this sort of program, I realized it had something going on already, and it gave me that extra push to pursue it full time. And I think the extra push came from the fact that I realized, like, okay, I'm not going to go anywhere by doing this just on a part-time basis on the side, because it requires just so much work. Like you need a lot of dedication and work to develop the technology, again, like raise the money and hire the team, manage the team, and so on. And, I realized that nobody's going to invest in a company where the founder and CEO is just, working on it part-time, right? So you have to kind of show commitment and show a dedication. So I decided to kind of take the plunge and go at it full-time. And I think it took me at least 2 years after the fact before we started seeing real investment money come in. as opposed to just like grants and competition money and so on. So I was able to kind of sustain the company, bootstrap it through
Yes.
competitions and,
Yeah.
entrepreneurial events and whatnot. But and that was really helpful, honestly. Like that was really helpful in getting some money to keep myself afloat and hire some interns, develop the technology a little bit, get some momentum. But I think it over time things started building up, and we were able to finally raise a good amount of capital to jumpstart the company into full
Well,
gear.
so you bootstrapped from day one, and then you started winning competitions, and you're privately held still.
That's
Um,
correct. Yeah.
who's on your team?
So that's a great question. Currently, I'm one of the founders, and I ended up finding a great set of co-founders out in the West Coast in the United States. Oh,
And who
I-
are they?
So that's Suresh Bai and Celso Bagosian. They're from a firm called Lamamed. I really tried hard to find co-founders in the like minimal invasive surgical space in the Canadian landscape,
And
particularly
you
in the
and you
GTA
couldn't?
landscape. It was very hard, like to find people that had this minimal invasive surgery background, like successful entrepreneurs with a track record of minimal invasive surgery. We just don't have that expertise in Canada,
Wow.
or if we do, it's very hard to find. I think a lot of the Canadian medtech industry historically has been focused on medical imaging as opposed to medical instrumentation. So there's a lot of expertise on the medical imaging, but that's not what Xpan was about. Whereas in the United States, there's a lot of expertise in all areas of medical innovation and pharma and what have you. So I was actually doing one of those pitch competitions down in the Bay Area. It was actually sponsored by the Canadian consulate at the time, which I'm eternally grateful for. And Suresh was one of the panelists. He was this panel speaker about medtech entrepreneurship and angel investing and all of that. He was listening to my pitch, and we were paired up. And I did some digging on him, and turned out he was a successful entrepreneur that has commercialized and sold a few companies directly in the minimal invasive, like laparoscopic space. And as a matter of fact, he had developed this particular technology that is used to close the defect or the hole that's left by the large
Really?
trocars. So, he had very specific like subject matter expertise. Again, we got paired up and we started talking, and we realized we had, similar values and interests in the field. He had a lot of experience in this space, a lot of connections. And, over a course of a year, I think we were kind of just doing diligence on each other, and we decided to partner up by like 2019 or so.
Wow.
So, we decided to join hands and work together. So he's been, really great addition to the team. And then he introduced us to also contract manufacturing on the East Coast and other sort of talented people, including sales and marketing experts and so on. That's kind of high level structure of the team. I'm also fortunate to have Stefano Picconi, who was one of my mentors at Canavi. So he was at the time the director of finance at Canavi. I would stop by his office when I was an intern every day. We chat for like 15 minutes about whatever's going on the business side of the world. And he sort of taught me a lot about the basics of medtech business and finance. So when I launched this company, he was always kind of involved in the periphery, watching from the sideline, giving me some advice and support. So ultimately, I asked him to also join as an advisor and board member of the company. And I'm very, grateful to have him on board as well.
Serendipity and mentorship plays a huge role in companies like yours.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how
Absolutely.
some things just fall into place.
I think if you ask somebody like Stefano, he'll say, okay, well, yes, but also there's a lot of opportunity because there's also been a revolving door of interns, for example, at Canavi. But it seemed to him that I was one of the only people that would go up and talk to him, right? Like the opportunity is always there, in my opinion. It's up to people to seize it, right? Like whether you're working your way as an intern at a company, developing relationships with people outside of your specific field, whether it was at the hospital at Sunnybrook when I had, developed relationships with researchers and, other folks. Some people I ended up hiring from those kind of opportunities, and and, the Medvention program, I identified some really great talent there. And, just even the capstone program that I was in, right? Like I could have just done the research and walked away with like a nice kind of project on my resume. But I would say there's always opportunities out there for people if they're open-minded about it and seeking those
You know,
opportunities.
if I could read between the lines, it sounds like the advice that I was given by my oldest sister, who unfortunately passed away quite a few
Sorry.
years ago. Thank you. And she heard I was going into real estate instead of teaching, which everybody thought I was going to do. She said, "Okay," and pulled me aside and said, "Always get into the habit of saying hello
Yes.
and just knock on a door and say hi."
Yeah.
And be open to a conversation. Again, reading between the lines, it sounds like that was a big part of your journey initially.
Oh,
You mentioned,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
you mentioned earlier a book. What was the book?
I believe it's called the Stanford Biodesign.
Can I buy
Um,
it on Amazon?
I think you can buy it on Amazon, or I have to double check, but it's available.
I think sales just shot
Easy
up.
to, hopefully, I always try to promote it. It's a really good read. I mean, people refer to it as the Bible of medtech, so to speak.
Okay.
Professors often in biomedical engineering programs use the book to kind of structure many of their innovation courses or design courses and whatnot. And it's a great kind of read for people that are interested in medical entrepreneurship
Thank
or
you.
medical
So,
innovation in general. Like if you want to get a better understanding of, having a structured process, this is the way.
so I'm assuming obviously your target client are surgeons, and you mentioned earlier that there's what is it 150 million
Yeah,
procedures done annually right now, and the trend is amplifying that number, not diminishing it. So you've been in business for a handful of years. You're located in Vaughan, Ontario, and for those who don't know, that's in the north end of the Greater Toronto area.
that's correct.
Why
Yeah.
Vaughan?
It's a good question. I think when we first started, we were based at the University of Toronto on ramp space. So it was one of their entrepreneurial spaces. I was also involved with the Hatchery, which had a great space as well. And then the pandemic hit. So we ended up having to go and work from home for almost 2 years. And at the time when we decided to come back, those spaces were still kind of trying to figure out how to allow people to come in safely and deal with all the, I guess, masking and working spaces in a joint way, which I think like common workspaces kind of diminished at the time after COVID.
Hmm.
It was not very popular. And at the time, I think we also grew as a company, so had few more employees, and we really just needed our lab space. We needed our own kind of private, space to tinker around and have a lab. And I think it just made a lot of sense to have the space located somewhere around Vaughan, where it's accessible for many people on the
Subway.
highway.
Okay.
So there's a subway
Yeah.
line there too. I also realized like if we were to have like a strong talent pool joining in the company, I can't just focus on young people graduating from university to be my primary, you know, uh, uh, talent pool, right? And unfortunately, downtown, that's what it caters to. Like you're looking for like younger people, like yuppies, right? That they want to live downtown, they want to stay downtown, commute downtown, etc., because it's fun. But a lot of, professionals tend to prefer living in the suburbs, right? They have families, they have obligations, etc. Getting downtown is painful, difficult to commute and park and drive or take the TTC or other public transport opportunities.
One of the other things that spun out of the pandemic was a lot of people that were living downtown were told, okay, you got to work from home. And they were in small condos and they thought, well, I don't have enough
Yeah,
room. So they
yeah,
moved to the
exactly.
905 belt and you tapped into that. So good on you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was like a strategic decision at the time of, okay, we had good fun and developed a lot of good relationships with people downtown. But if we wanted to continue our talent development in a sustainable way with identifying talented people that are going to stick around for the long term instead of staying in for a few months or a year or so and move out of the downtown core, that was the way to go. And also rent is cheaper.
Yeah. Significant.
As a kind of company that's like, obviously we're a startup that's cash strapped and everything. We're trying to be as capital efficient with our money, right? So the amount of space that we get and, the office space that we have is a lot bigger than what we could have ever afforded downtown.
Hey, it's Jim. When we come back, Zaid and I talk about how Xpan was built, the team behind it, and what it will take to get their technology into operating rooms. Stay with us. I'm Jim Wilson, and you're listening to NGBiLab. Hi, it's Jim Wilson. I'd like to take a moment to explain that the goal of this podcast is to shine a light on the innovators and disruptors who are creating the next generation of companies in Canadian life sciences. We hope you enjoy hearing about what next great big ideas are on the horizon and learning about the people who are working on those ideas. We also hope you like what we're doing, and we have a small favor to ask. We will greatly appreciate you promoting us on social with the hashtags NGBiLab, NGBI Podcasts, and NGBI Summit. And don't forget to follow us so you don't miss any future episodes. By the way, if you're a startup founder who is working on one of the next great big ideas in Canadian life sciences, or you know someone who is, please reach out to us. My contact information is at the end of today's show, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much. Let's get back to our conversation. How many people are on your team right now? Like, are you 10, 12, 6?
So we're about 5 full-time in the Toronto office, and we have about another 5 to 6 people sort of like part-time in the United States. That includes my co-founders and some sales and marketing expertise.
Huh. And I read, I guess just over a year ago, you got FDA approval on successful completion of a number of human surgeries, I guess, that I'm assuming opened up a floodgate of opportunity for you in the States. What exactly happened?
Yeah, so after many years of work on the product development, we were finally successful in getting the product FDA cleared, and we did a first in human evaluation in the United States. Following that, we got a lot of great feedback about the product. We had to make some minor tweaks to it in the period following it. So we went back into a little like R&D mode earlier in 2024. And we were successful in implementing some of those required changes to the product, and we will launch it again in the fall of 2024. And so far, we've done more than 20 human cases that went very well, and we're really proud of that milestone and achievement for the company. And right now, we're gearing towards doing up to 50 and up to 100 kind of clinical procedures. As part of our, clinical rollout, we want to do a slow and contained, kind of small, limited market release where we, demonstrate our product across a number of different surgical disciplines, right? As I mentioned, there's a lot of different subspecialties. So we wanted to kind of get feedback and experiences from surgeons in a lot of different procedures and patient demographics. And that would help us to kind of prepare our sales and marketing materials and prepare us to do a commercial launch subsequently.
So are those surgical trials, I guess clinical trials, being done in the States, or are they being done here?
They're so far all being done in the United States, yeah.
Okay. And is there a reason behind that? Like, are we just more difficult to make it happen and it's easier in the States?
There is an unfortunately an overwhelming trend to do things in the States first, primarily because it's where the market opportunity is. Like, it's a huge market opportunity.
Right.
Canada is very big geographically, yet not as densely populated, right? So geographically, you have to service a lot of big territories, sparse geographies for 1/10 of a market opportunity of that of the United States.
Yeah. Well,
so you'd rather invest in the US than in Canada. And also, I mean, the other part of it is, for all its benefits, potential downsides are single payer healthcare system prefers contracts done on a provincial stage. you have to be ready to supply the entire province, and you have to be ready to, offer massive discounts to do that. And for a small startup, I mean, we're nowhere close to being able to do that, right? Like we're, doing small scale kind of launches. We want to work with, one hospital at a time sort of thing. And that is a lot more complicated and difficult here. There's a lot of great initiatives happening in Ontario in particular, and also across Canada, that is promoting the ability for startup companies to launch their products in hospitals. But at the same time, we also have an investor mandate, right? And investors want to get the best kind of return for their money. And part of that is getting the best outcome possible for investors, and strategically that forces us to be positioning ourselves in the United States right now.
That is unfortunately a story that I've heard ad nauseum. And your story is so inspiring. The backstory is so frustrating. And I hope someone in government's going, you know what, we need to fix that. And I know that there's no easy fix here. And it's easy for me to complain on behalf of the rest of the community, but we've got all of these great ideas going south of the border. And wouldn't it be great if somebody went, yeah, let's stop that?
It is very frustrating for us as Canadian innovators. I think that same story is unfortunately not unique to me. And it is very frustrating because at the end of the day, this is a Canadian-born innovation, right? It was a Canadian surgeon, Canadian surgical innovation space, right?
Canadian IP.
Canadian IP, Canadian, engineers coming from flagship Canadian universities and whatnot.
Market here that you can't access.
And there is a market here that we cannot access. It was literally down the road from where, the device was created, right? And I have to travel so far to be able to get it used and commercialized.
Wow.
So it is a little frustrating. I mean, not little, it is very frustrating. I hope through mediums like, this podcast and others that this this sort of problem gets heard and it gets amplified to the proper channels and various levels of government, hopefully, where we can bring Canadian innovation to Canadians first instead of our counterparts in the United States.
I think there's a snippet there that we'd like to take out and send to a bunch of people. Again, coming back to your website, there is an impressive list of partner organizations that you're involved with, including U of T, of course, and in particular the H2I and the on-ramp programs, which I'm familiar with. And for those listeners who may not be, look them up online. It's really good program. But also Facet and Band of Angels, Venture Lab in Markham, Synapse Life Sciences Consortium in Hamilton, MyTax, the Ontario Centers of Innovation, OCI, and the Ontario Bioscience Innovation Organization, OBIO.
Yeah, very good.
And NRC, the National Research Council of Canada. That's an impressive roster of supporting organizations. Obviously, you've got some believers.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. I think we've been very blessed to garner the support of all these organizations. Their help in, this was the launch pad for Xpan, I believe, like the support that we got from all these organizations to get the right mentorship, to get a lot of early on advice about what not to do and what we should focus on, as well as financial support. So, I mean, a lot of these organizations do provide financial support for early stage startups. That was crucial for us getting started, right? Like hiring some early talent and doing the technology iteration at the time. And to this day, I think some of them continue to support us in a very meaningful way. And I think if it wasn't for that support, we wouldn't be here.
So I'm wondering what the next step is.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time for us. Like I said, we've been on this journey for past few years now. Most of it has been very kind of focused on the technology, right? Like developing the product, getting the product manufactured, getting FDA clearance, testing it out early in, a clinical setting, animal studies, etc. I think the next phase is going to be the commercial phase, right? Where we move, albeit slowly, right? It's not going to be a big jump into the commercial space, but we're transitioning little by little from this sort of R&D technical mindset towards this commercial mindset of, okay, well, now we have a product and now we need to start getting out there trying to sell it and market it. And that has its own unique set of challenges. And, I think this is a very exciting thing for me as well, because I also haven't done it before, but I'm really excited about taking part of this commercial journey. Again, I'm very fortunate and grateful to be surrounded by experts like Suresh and like some of the like Robert Hoxie, who's also on our team, and others from the sales and marketing kind of world that have been coaching me on how to get into the commercial mindset and start our commercial efforts.
Wow. I'd love to continue talking to you for the rest of the day. I've got so many questions, but I want to be respectful of your time. One of the questions I'd like asking, because it just opens up a whole realm of really interesting thoughts, is looking back on your journey to date. Is there any advice you wish someone had given you out of the gate that you might pass along to people who might be listening to this conversation?
Oh man, this is a tough one. The advice that you shared earlier about, saying hello and connecting with people, having a conversation, never know where it might lead. I definitely encourage a lot of people early in their careers to do that, regardless of what position they're in. Always, approach people with an open-minded kind of spirit and be genuinely curious about their career pathways and how they got there, and be genuinely curious about them, right? Like what makes them tick as a person, and how you and your personality is similar to that person that you admire. You'll find a lot of cool nuggets that reflect your own at sometimes. The other piece of advice I would say, I mean, again, I'm sure Canadians or people in government may not like this so much, but I also advise people, especially medtech entrepreneurs, to look early at the US market, right? Like look early into identifying the right talents to join your team from potential US, talent pool, and US investment opportunities as well.
So, Zaid, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I really appreciate it. It sounds like you've got a tiger by the tail, and I look forward to hearing some great news from your company in the very near future.
Jim, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate your questions, and I'm very excited to be featured on this podcast.
That was Zaid Atto, founder and CEO of Xpan, which is a medical device company based in Vaughan, Ontario. If you'd like to learn more about Xpan, you can find details at xpanmedical.com. You can also find them on social at xpanmedical. Now, if you'd like to learn more about this podcast and our other shows, please visit nextgreatbigideas.com. You can also follow us on social at NGBI Podcasts. On a similar note, if you're interested in learning about who I am when I'm not hosting podcasts, check out jim-wilson.ca, and you can find details about my team at laboccupier.com. You can also follow me on social at laboccupier. This episode of NGBI Lab was researched by Xenia Pinto and edited by No Limit Marketing. If you'd like to get in touch, email is always best. My address is jwilson@leonard, that's LENNARD.com. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.